Today we have a tremendous case and where so many things happen that it really impresses a lot. Before we start, I invite you to my channel, Who Was It?, where you can find many interesting cases. And also know that you can send your own experience to the WhatsApp that appears on screen at this moment. Neither the quantity nor the duration of the audios matter. And you can also add all the material that you think is appropriate so that your story is as complete as possible, because all the details are important. Friends, now we begin with this new paranormal story. Enjoy it. If I tell you that a woman was skinning cats and leaving them at my front door, what would you think? What I'm going to tell you is known by few people, and it wasn't out of shame that I stopped telling it. I think I got tired of many people taking this as something simple. Maybe I understand it because they don't. Didn't feel firsthand everything I suffered for months. Is there a neighborhood in Buenos Aires that is known for something in particular? Some sympathize with this and others do not, as is my case, and the bad luck or a very bad fate made me know it in a way I could never have imagined. My name is Andrea and I'm from Quilmes, Buenos Aires province. I had a totally normal life, where there are friends, neighbors, family. I got married, had a son, then unfortunately I got divorced. But due to life circumstances, completely removed from this experience that I want to share today. One thing I would like to mention is that ever since I became independent at 21 years old, I've always rented. And I never liked apartments, so my search is based on houses. And if they are at the back, even better. It's a completely personal matter, and it makes me feel somehow safer. So, I am now 53 years old. I've been through many houses, you can imagine, where nothing ever happened, and I always felt perfectly fine. Until at one point I ended up in the wrong house and in a very complex neighborhood. Exactly. In the year 2014 was when my lease was ending for the house I was renting with my son. I was already separated by then and we had to urgently go in search of another place. I started a somewhat rushed search through many of the real estate agencies in the area, but I couldn't find anything. Until I came across a listing for a house that was not only within my budget, but was really very nice. In every sense of the word, and I could tell you that I fell in love at first sight.
I went to see it. I had already seen a lot of houses, and this house struck me. When I arrived among them, the entrance was beautiful, and when to access the back, you had to go through a rose bush. It was a rose garden. It was a garden full of roses, among other plants, but what stood out the most were the roses. Oh, it was beautiful, it was light, it was grass, sun and flowers, it was something incredible, besides the house, which was spectacular too, and it had the house. What had something very nice for me was that it had a gallery where I already imagined putting armchairs, a small table, and putting ceiling fans in the gallery. It was filled with hummingbirds. It was something I can't explain. It was beautiful.
Similarly, after seeing it, I went to see the other houses I had noted down. Because often one becomes infatuated with something for 10 reasons. And it turns out that what was to come was much better. In this case it wasn't so, because none of them matched it. They were all nice, comfortable, also according to the price, but that garden, the gallery, and the amount of light that entered that house was something impressive. It was a house that, more than renting it, you wanted to buy it. One detail that I noticed, but didn't pay much attention to, was that the house was 100 meters from the EZPELETA cemetery, a huge cemetery surely full of stories. But I repeat, to make it clear that I didn't pay it any mind, because I'm not a superstitious person or anything like that. I do believe in God, but I don't believe in churches. And since I had never experienced anything paranormal, having the cemetery nearby meant absolutely nothing to me. If we think about it calmly and rationally, at some point we all end up in the same place.
I rented that house. I went to the real estate agency. We did all the paperwork. I paid everything I had to pay, and I moved into that house. The person who lived in front of that house was an older woman I honestly don't know if she's still alive, but in 2014 she was already 80 years old. A single, very nice widow. When we went to see the house with the real estate people, she received us with such sweetness, love, a beautiful person. She lived alone with her 2 little dogs. She also had a very nice house, very nice. Well, she ends up renting the house, which takes days. It's not like you go pay and enter. They have to check your background and, well, a lot of things that you have to meet to rent.
A few days later, we finished all the paperwork and the time came to move into the house. But that morning when we arrived, an incident occurred, the first of many, that caught our attention. When we arrived, the owner was waiting for us, and before I could set foot inside the house, she grabbed my arm in a rather abrupt manner and looked at me with a bit of anger. And she told me pay close attention to this, that in that house, she didn't want any names to come in, because the last tenant had sex in the bathroom and broke the toilet. I know very well that this seems like a joke, and you can imagine that I was speechless. I didn't know what to say to her. So I simply told her to stay calm, that she would live in the house with my son and no one else. She then released me, smiling as usual, and we entered the house. This woman's reaction was unexpected, but also the way she spoke and the way she looked at me. Her expression was of someone very different from the one we had known. I repeat that from the very beginning we had met a very old lady, friendly, smiling, lucid above all things, and never... This was expected, but everyone is unique, as the saying goes. And I was unaware, perhaps, of the bad experience he had had with his last tenant. The truth is that beyond the fact that the liner was indeed new had they changed it, what this lady told us was not relevant to us, and just as we listened to her, we forgot. But do you know what happened? That first night in our new house, we were about to have dinner. I go to the bathroom to urinate and the toilet breaks in front of me without any kind of explanation.
Since, I don't know, I didn't have sex with anyone, no one came to my house. No, nothing. It broke, the toilet cracked, nothing that broke and fell apart, everything cracked right before my eyes. I said, what is this? The following day, I complained to the real estate agency who informed the lady. And well, a series of problems arose because the lady swore and perjured that I had let a man in to have sex in the toilet and that I broke it. That wasn't it. She ended up paying for it. We put in a new toilet and...
Just like that first morning when she received us, this woman was different. She was no longer kind, friendly, smiling. She was the complete opposite. And my son and I couldn't understand how she had changed so much in just a few days. But always understanding that she was an older person, we didn't know if she had any health problems, so we didn't think too much about it. Still, we kept thinking a lot about that strange coincidence of the toilet breaking, considering that she had warned us about it just a few hours before. What was going on there? The thing was that as the days went by, this woman who lived ahead, by the way, got worse and worse. Unpleasant, hateful, even though we had no problems with her of any kind. Another issue was that out of nowhere in our house, things would stop breaking. No, from the house only are things, whether it's a refrigerator, a television, the radio, the computer. And something that was a great complication because we couldn't get them out, it was very difficult. It was that the house was filled with blowflies, those flies that are huge, and diamond flies would appear. In the kitchen, in the dining room, and also in that beautiful gallery that was impossible to use, many times due to this issue. And if all this seems too much, there was a situation that really marked a before and after. One morning I get up, and when I go out to the garden, I found a wire that was tied between two of the trees. And this woman had hung 2 dead cats, but not only that, she had skinned them and left them there in front of our house. She didn't have cats, so we never knew who they belonged to. And my son was the one who quickly got up and helped me take them out to the street with bags. We discussed this with the real estate agency that same morning, who asked us for time to be able to talk to her and resolve the matter, but they never got anywhere. In fact, for me, they surely knew very well the behavior of this woman. Another very sad fact was that we saw one afternoon how she boiled her own turtle alive. Just as you hear it. When we got to that house, we had seen her walking in the garden, and weeks later we just came across this. It was more than evident that the woman had psychiatric problems and no one was helping her, but we were there being hostages, could it be said, of her whims and madness. And in our house, specifically within our house, everything got worse. Because we started to see shadows that appeared in the corners, noises were heard out of nowhere, whispers, things kept breaking, doors that opened or closed on their own. It was impressive. And all this added to what this woman made us go through during the day. But also at night, because some early mornings we saw her walking through our garden, in total darkness and often in a cold that chilled your bones. At those times, we didn't dare to go out because her reactions became increasingly violent, and we understood that leaving her alone was the best for everyone. Over time, everything got even worse, as one morning we found that she had changed the front lock and we couldn't get out. We were locked in. I had to jump the fence and go to the real estate agency again to complain about this, and luckily it was resolved. But just days later, my son calls me at work screaming because the lady, according to him, wanted to kill Mora, our dog. Can you imagine that day ended in a scandal? Because our dog not only behaved well, but whenever she went out, she did so on a leash or stayed in our garden without bothering anyone. Therefore, this was unacceptable to me. The issue, and this was a cold shower, was finding out that this woman was some kind of witch or something similar. I wouldn't know what title to give it, but everything she was doing and everything that was happening to us inside the house was largely linked to everything she was doing to us. Because I have no idea. During those days, the atmosphere in our house became so heavy that I even doubted my own sanity. Because, as I told you, we just heard screams, voices, furniture falling, there were shadows around the rooms. It was something totally new for us, terrifying, and we didn't know what to do. I went to the doctor because I needed a professional opinion, but logically he referred me to a psychologist. That when he saw me and I told him that I saw shadows and heard voices, he referred me to a psychiatrist who ended up, without much analysis, giving me medication to calm my nerves. I want to make it clear that I don't reject this because they are professionals who obviously base themselves on the knowledge they studied, and it is perfectly valid. In fact, I would have the same opinion, but in this case, it was different because I was experiencing it in a terrifying way with my son, and it was frustrating that no one believed us. Days later, chatting with a neighbor, I found out that this woman was known precisely for being someone who did magic and witchcraft. She was associated with different cults and was basically to be feared, so I was told. We never realized any of this. And not only that, he told me that in the neighborhood there were many families who were dedicated to the same thing or simply worshipped different deities. As I said at the beginning, I was never a suggestible person because I had never experienced anything paranormal, but that house, that woman and this neighborhood showed me how wrong I was. I didn't know what to do, and we were really going crazy. To tell you that I lost a lot of weight, eating perfectly well and without having health problems, I tell you everything. We constantly felt bad. We were living a hell. You're likely wondering why they didn't depart. But we didn't have the means to do so, since we had signed the contract for a certain period of time. And we had to fulfill it or pay the corresponding penalty, which we didn't have. Let's not forget that we were constantly fixing things that broke in the house. This was something uncontrollable and also unbearable. One afternoon, a friend came to visit who I hadn't seen in a long time, and she was the one who, being totally honest, told me how bad the house was, how bad I was, my son, and that we had to leave there urgently because if not, things could end very badly. Finally, we left there, ending the contract early and with tremendous effort, but it was the best thing we could do. This same friend recommended me to a person who did energy cleanings. I don't know if anything else, but they were able to help us. There were several sessions where he said he saw several entities attached to us, mainly to me, and luckily he managed to get them out. Believe it or not, and I say this being someone who was always reluctant to take certain things seriously, our life returned to being perfectly normal. Obviously, even though it's hard for me to believe those energies were consuming us, I think that's the correct word, I never knew if this woman had anything to do with it, if it was the neighborhood, the neighbors, the cemetery, which by the way, we were near the crematorium and beyond, which supposedly there shouldn't be smoke coming from the bodies during cremation. At least it's not like that there. Not only can you see it, but there's also a constant smell that's not pleasant for anyone. This was my story, and luckily today I was able to tell it